I get asked questions about fractional marketing and what I do all the time. So I figured, why not just answer all of them here? So that is what we're going to do today. I'm going to answer the top 5 questions that I get about fractional marketing. Welcome to Spark Sessions. I'm Lori Tyler. I am a fractional chief marketing officer. I am the founder of Ignite Marketing, and I am your host. And I've spent 25 years in B2B marketing, and I built Ignite Marketing around a very simple belief that great marketing leadership should be accessible to any organization. So let's start at the beginning, because I think there's a lot of confusion around what this actually is. That's why there's so many questions about it. So the first question is, what exactly is a fractional CMO? What is fractional marketing in general? And how is it different than hiring a consultant or an agency? So what I would tell you is, they're all different types of fractional marketers. I happen to be a fractional chief marketing officer, but I also have a team of fractional marketers who are at different levels and who also specialize in specific disciplines. So you think, people that specialize in demand gen or in content or in digital or in public relations. And that's helpful, I think, so that every client gets exactly the expertise that their business needs. It is carved specifically for them and for their business needs. A fractional CMO specifically is a marketing executive. They're someone who has been in a CMO role before in-house, but who now works with companies on a part-time basis to provide that same strategic marketing leadership. So the word fractional just means a fraction of their time. So, it's typically, I would say, somewhere between 10 and 15 hours a week, but it depends on the engagement and what the needs are. And that's all figured out beforehand. But it is not a consultant. A consultant, in my opinion, gives you a report. And they kind of drop that and they leave you to figure it out. And they're not bringing the ability to execute. Or, maybe they give you a strategy deck. Maybe they give you very specific recommendations. But then it's on you to figure out what to do with it. And I just don't feel like that's very helpful either. So a fractional CMO, and especially who brings a fractional team, they're embedded in your business. And so, using me as the example, I'm in your key planning meetings. I'm talking to your sales team, and I am accountable for your growth objectives in the same way that a full-time CMO would be, just without the full-time cost and without having to pay the benefits, the bonus, or the equity. Fractional is also not an agency. So an agency, to me, executes what you tell them to. So they're built to produce deliverables, and you have to be the one who knows enough about marketing and marketing strategy to be able to tell them what to do and to be able to manage them. A fractional CMO is the person who really figures all that out. Like, what should you be doing? What is going to work for your business? What should actually be produced in the first place? And they develop the marketing strategy and they manage the execution. And we manage the execution, whether it's your team, my team, or a combination of the two. And it's usually not, but it's sometimes a placeholder. So sometimes companies might bring in a fractional CMO when they're searching for a full-time hire, and that's fine. But the idea that the fractional is somehow a lesser version of the real thing, that is something I just don't buy. And I think a lot of companies, and most companies, maybe all companies, I'm going to say all companies who have worked with fractional in the past do figure out that the fractional model serves them better in the long run. It's because of the flexibility and the cost structure and the ability to scale up or scale down. So for many organizations, that is just simply the better model for them. So the way that I do it at Ignite Marketing, and I think this is what really sets apart a true fractional engagement from, another agency or consulting model is that I don't come in alone when needed. So I have a team of specialists who I will hand select. They come in alongside of me. They are specifically chosen based on the client needs, and what each project actually requires. And so, depending on your situation, it could be the demand gen expert or the content person or the web developer or a paid media specialist. It's whatever the strategy calls for and whatever is in the approved marketing plan and whatever gap that needs to be filled that you don't have a person for in-house. And I would, or your fractional CMO would direct all of that, all of those resources, their resources or your resources. So you get the strategy and the execution all managed through one senior leader. You are not having to do that yourself. And that's a very different thing from a solo consultant coming in and dropping a deck on your desk and kind of wishing you good luck. So, okay, question 2. Is this model only for smaller companies who can't afford a full-time CMO? The answer is no. And I'm glad this question always comes up and I'll answer it directly. So it is an understandable assumption because the fractional model gets talked about a lot in the context of smaller businesses. And yes, it absolutely works for those businesses, but framing it only for smaller businesses really misses a huge part of the bigger picture. So for startups and for those small businesses, I think the fractional model gives you that strategic marketing foundation from day one that you need. They're going to bring the right channels, the right messaging, the right MarTech stack, and it's all coming from real B2B experience. I think the instinct in small organizations, a lot of times is to delay marketing leadership until you're bigger. And what actually happens in the meantime is the company spends years of executing marketing that just isn't working. They're doing it in the wrong channels. There's messaging that doesn't land. There's budget that's being spent on tactics with absolutely no strategy behind them. And a lot of times it's being run by a founder or just with someone without any marketing experience at all. And then someone with the experience has to come in and unwind all of it before you can actually start to rebuild something that actually works. And so that takes time and that takes more money. And so getting it right from the start saves years of course correcting. And that ROI is a huge thing to think about. For mid-sized companies and those companies that are really in growth mode, this is where I think the need and the business case shows up most clearly because you're growing. You probably have a small marketing team in place. They are likely working extremely hard, but there's probably a gap between the results that you're getting and the results that you need. And that gap usually isn't effort. It's usually strategy and leadership. And if marketing and sales are feeling like they're operating in different orbits, and if the team is feeling reactive and overwhelmed all the time, and if nobody's asking whether they're even working on the right things, again, those are leadership gaps. And that's where a fractional CMO is really built to come in and close those gaps. And then for larger organizations, I think this is the one for some reason that surprises people, but more and more larger organizations, the ones who already have a CMO in place, they are really turning to the fractional model a lot these days because there are always more priorities and more things that have to get done than there is bandwidth from the team in-house to actually be able to execute all of these things. So it could be a new product launch that needs a dedicated team or dedicated leadership or, dedicated product marketer. Maybe it's that leadership wants to go into a new market and you just don't have the internal resource for that. Or maybe you need an AEO strategy and you just don't have the knowledge in-house yet from anybody. The fractional model gives you that surge capacity and the specialist capacity on demand without having to add permanent headcount. It is the on-demand model that's working exactly as it was designed to. So it's definitely a model that works for any stage. The reasons are just different depending on where you are, but I think there's definitely value across all of them. Okay, so question 3, what does a fractional CMO actually do during the day? Like, what are you getting out of a fractional CMO? And this is such a fair question. I think it's one of the really important ones because the concept is easy to understand, but then the day-to-day reality is, I think, where it gets fuzzy for some people. So I will walk you through exactly actually what it looks like. So again, with me, everything starts with discovery. So again, using my approach as the example, before I write a single strategy or make a single recommendation, I need to understand the business, not just what's going on in marketing, but really the whole business. And that means sitting down for some questions with some key stakeholders. It might be the CEO. It is definitely the sales team. It is the product team. And I ask things like, what are your growth goals? Who are your buyers? What does your competitive landscape look like? Where are the gaps that you're seeing? And that discovery is the foundation that everything else that I do is built on. And so from there, I build the strategic marketing plan, and that is tied explicitly to the business objectives that I heard and the sales goals that are in place. I don't do it in a vacuum. I have conversations about it. I socialize it. We go back and forth on it until we have agreement. And we make sure that it meets your discretionary budget needs and it takes your own marketing resources into consideration. And then we stack hands on it. And once we've done that and we're in agreement, we start executing. And sometimes the execution starts earlier. Sometimes there's always quick win opportunities to actually start doing execution in parallel with the strategy. And that's where the magic really happens. And that's where I think it works just a little bit different because I'm also directing all of it. So whether it's being done with my team or, whether it's a different fractional CMO doing it with their team or your team, it is all a combined team. We operate as one team. And so you have one senior point of contact managing everything from inside of your organization, not just sitting on the outside and just advising from the outside. The engagement structure is extremely flexible. So it can be project-based, it can be a phased approach, it can be an ongoing retainer. And we figure out in those early conversations what fits best. And in every case, though, you are going to get that marketing leader and then you're going to get the execution in order to back it up if that's what you need. And I think that's how it usually works for most fractional CMOs who also bring in an execution team. Okay, so question number 4, how do I know if my company is ready for a CMO or if we actually need one? And I love this question, and I'm going to be straight with you, including when the answer is no. So there are a few signals that tell me whether a fractional CMO is going to be the right move for you. And one is if marketing feels like it's a black box, because if you are spending money on marketing and if you genuinely can't tell what's working or what's driving pipeline or whether any of it is moving the needle, It is not a tactics problem. It's a strategy problem. And a fractional CMO will come in and assess and figure out what's actually happening. And they will build the framework around what is actually needed to tie back to business outcomes. And another one that's real common that I see all the time is if marketing and sales are misaligned. And this is just such a common frustration if sales is feeling like the leads are not quality, or if the content that they're being given doesn't help them sell. And if marketing and sales are telling different stories in the market, again, that's a leadership and alignment gap. And that's just a very, very common thing that I walk into. Or if your team is busy, but not strategic. So if your marketing team is working incredibly hard, but if everything just feels reactive, if they feel like they're always just chasing the next request and never getting ahead or executing without a clear plan, that's what usually happens when there's no leader who's creating the strategy and protecting the team's focus. More activity isn't the answer. They need better direction, and they need focus on alignment, and they need focus on alignment with the things that are going to move them closer to hitting the business goals. Or if you have a specific gap or project with just no bandwidth to execute it. So like I mentioned before, if you have a product launch or a rebrand that you have to do, or this new market entry opportunity, or whatever capability that you just don't have in-house, this is one of the clearest use cases. So you need something done at a high level, and either your current team just doesn't have the bandwidth for it, or they just don't have the expertise. And that is a great case for the fractional model and the specialist team behind it. That is what the fractional model is built for. Now, when is it not the right fit? I would say if you are pre-revenue, or if you're still trying to find product market fit, you're probably not at the stage yet where marketing leadership is the highest leverage investment, or if there's no budget for execution. There's only so much a strategist can do. So the strategist alone is going to be set up to not be able to move the needle for you. Or if your leadership team, if they're not ready to act, or if they're not ready to accept a marketing strategy, there are probably deeper organizational issues that are going to eventually block execution. And that's really worth addressing first. I would rather have those conversations up front than be brought into an engagement that is not going to be set up for success, because that just doesn't serve anybody. Okay. Question 5, what does it cost and how do I make the case internally? Okay. So the numbers, everybody wants to jump to the numbers. So I will give you the real scoop. Okay. So think about a full-time CMO. They're going to cost $250,000 minimum just in base salary alone. Then you have to add benefits and equity and bonuses and maybe recruiting fees. And, at the end of the day, you're looking at $350,000 to $400,000 before that person has ever done anything yet. So the fractional model delivers same level of senior marketing expertise at a fraction of that cost. So retainers, again, they're going to run probably 10 to 15 hours a week. So you are going to end up paying for just the capacity you need and nothing more, nothing less. And, sometimes what I think gets overlooked too in that comparison with the way that I work is you're also not paying for the separate agency overhead, on top of all that. If you have access to a CMO who is also bringing in the execution talent. So with my model, when I'm bringing in a specialist as part of the engagement, they're hand selected, they're project specific, they're directly managed by me. You're not adding a separate layer of account managers between you and the actual work. So it's a much clearer, much cleaner model. And the other part of that question was, how do you make the case for it internally? And there's a few things that I would suggest. So first, put the cost of inaction on the table. So think about, what is the gap in your marketing leadership? What is that actually costing you right now? What is it costing in pipeline? What is it costing in brand equity, in budget that's going to tactics that aren't working? Like those numbers, when you really sit down and think about it, they're usually a lot bigger than people realize when you take a look at it and when you put real numbers to it. Second, do the real cost comparison. So look at full-time salary, benefits, equity, those recruiting fees, the ramp up time. Put that against the fractional engagement that delivers the same strategic leadership plus a specialist team at a fraction of the investment. And when you lay it out that way, if you're having the conversation with your CFO, for example, the conversation, I think, tends to go a lot better because it becomes very clear very quickly. And third is, it's a flexible investment. It's not a fixed cost. So one of the things that I think CFOs genuinely appreciate about in this model is that it actually scales. So if business conditions change, the engagement adjusts. You are not locked into a multi-year salary commitment. So the fractional model, it's not the right answer for every organization, but for a lot of companies, it is honestly the best way to access that marketing leadership that's needed at a cost structure that actually makes sense. So there you have it, the 5 questions that I get asked the most, answered as honestly as I know how. So what I hope that you take away from this is that the fractional model is not a workaround. It is not a compromise. It is a genuinely different way of accessing senior marketing expertise, and one that works across more organizations than I think people realize, and one that, when done right, delivers real results. So if any of this landed, or if you want to dig deeper, whether you're trying to figure out if this is the right fit for your business, or if you're a marketing leader who's just curious about what this path looks like, you can find me at ignitemarketing.pro. So poke around on the site. Please reach out to me. We can definitely have a chat about it. I would love that. If this was at all useful, please share it with somebody who might also appreciate it. Also leave a review if you're so inclined. I would appreciate it. And I'll see you next time.